punchline is organic's not necessarily the end of the road if you're trying to find something truly fresh and healthy with a quality control and trackable sourcing that, I was just talking about. Because there's these same almond orchards probably neighboring that field, probably even owned by the same company, with slightly different chemical choices in terms of what they're applying to the field. They're not using the harshest chemicals known to man. They're using certified organic chemicals, but of natural, origins. Which encompasses a lot of things. Mm-hmm. A lot of things are of natural origins, but you just have to look at the name of these products: organic pesticide, organic herbicide, organic fungicide. So you get hung up on the organic part and you think that's good. Just like when I first learned about organic food, I used to eat organic donuts and wonder why I wasn't getting healthy. I was like,
yes.
But they're organic. So organic isn't, the end of that conversation. The side part at the end, that's the part that kills things,
Yes.
So it doesn't matter what you call it on the front end. The name of the game is kill every living thing in this field except the cash crop.
Yeah.
So that means that scale and methodology, in this case industrial farming, seems to be maybe the most important thing, because at a small scale, let's just describe it as a family farm, you're not going to mechanize to that level. There's no reason. So you're already back down to my level where you have your hands on everything. And that's that's such a major game changer.
Yes.
And then there's a philosophical difference between I'm going to kill everything in this field except the cash crop versus I'm going to create lush biodiversity so that there's sort of a balancing of my garden. And that would be loosely described as regenerative practices. And so when people are focused on regenerating the land that they're working through their work and increasing biodiversity and increasing habitat for insects and other local wildlife and the whole food chain from there, that results in everything below the ground being equally as biodiverse. And so now we have a healthy living soil. And that produces the healthiest crops, right? And so it doesn't matter what type of food or animal, like if you're talking about grass-fed beef or whatever, like if it's a part of an integrated diverse system, it's going to have more highly realized nutrient profiles. It's going to be expressing itself to its fullest potential, just like these eggplants that I just gave you before we recorded. Like, you're saying I've never seen an eggplant like that. It's like the food at the grocery store doesn't even stand a chance compared to food coming fresh out of a garden down the road. It's not even the same type of eggplant, you know what I mean? Like they're only growing crops in the grocery store that can survive that whole insane process of getting on a huge truck and driving across the country and surviving for weeks in cold storage or sometimes months depending on the crop, like carrots. Some of these foods could be months old by the time they get to us. If you look sideways at this eggplant, it's going to start wilting in like half a day. Like you should eat this tonight. Like these varieties aren't for the shelf, you know what I mean? Like these are very delicate. Keep it in a dark room and eat it tonight. And so there's just certain things you can and can't do at scale. And that's sort of, for me, as a consumer, what really drives my decisions. Like if I'm at the grocery store, I know pretty much I'm in that industrial model. Sure, there's some great grocery stores that feature small farmers, but overwhelmingly true. And so the thing that I'm left with is farmers markets and CSAs. And this was a life-changing place for me, to join a CSA and to get food of that freshness, redefined what food was for me. And to join a CSA and to get food like I just gave you, of varieties that you have never seen before, including types of vegetables that you've never even heard of. Well, now you got to like look up a recipe and figure out what to do with it and get more engaged. And so there's this whole lifestyle that comes around interacting with fresh food, because now I got to go to the market on the weekend, and now I got a fridge full of fresh food. Now I'm not going to go out to eat that much that week because I'm going to cook all this fresh food I have. So connection with a small, as we were saying, artisanal garden, whether it be your own or a community or via the farmer's market or by joining a CSA, to me is like the number one life hack of people who want to have health in their lives or in their families' lives, because you gotta realize that otherwise you're essentially building yourself out of this industrial process that has good marketing in terms of the buzzwords of organic in this case. But if you just pull the curtain back a little bit, you'll see that they're producing shells of what could be produced in terms of nutrient density and cleanliness, which, I mean, those two things, whether you're talking about an eggplant or these skincare products here, nutrient density and cleanliness is really what a healthy person is looking for, at the end of the day. Those usually result in the case of skincare products, efficacy. And so to start with ingredients of that nature, our whole process then is to do as little as possible, basically get out of the way. When you have ingredients that are as nutrient dense as possible and as clean as possible, you don't have to do very much at that point. Like, you go to a restaurant, the best chefs, they'll serve you like 2 or 3, 4 ingredients on the plate, and you're like, this is the best
thing I've ever had.
Yeah, best thing I've ever had.
Yes.
And it was just super, super high quality ingredients that they didn't mess up, and they seasoned properly, of course, but that's our whole game. So the way these things are made is by growing them properly. That's how our skincare products are made, is growing or finding people who are growing the most unbelievably clean, nutrient dense, and passionate. Like, there's a difference between botanicals that come out of like a production farm that is selling at the farmer's market every week, and that's their main revenue source, is to sell these various very popular crops, and they just so happen to have some other flowers that I might be interested in. But that's different than, let's say, like a wild forager whose passion is to go find a couple of our wild ingredients, and it's their whole lifestyle. Or that's different, because those plants they're not even grown they're grown in the wild. I mean, that's where superfoods come from. So even though regenerative farms and biodynamic farms are the best we can do in terms of coming up with growing systems that emulate nature, they're certainly not nature. We're irrigating them, we're manipulating the soil, we're adding compost, we're growing crops and taking them away as opposed to letting them biodegrade in place. And so all of those things mean we've kind of like stepped away from nature a little bit. To do it in a way that's emulating nature is as close as we can get,
There's so much good truth to unpack in what you just said, too. You basically just had this massive mic drop moment, and you're getting my gears turning, because when you were talking about the zucchinis that you graciously brought here and the skincare products from your brand Be Here, it made me realize that, number one, the exchange that we just had, and also the way you live your life and everything you do, is like the antithesis of the industrial model. And I was also thinking that most people think they know what zucchinis are, what chicken is, what strawberries are, and really probably 99% of Americans have only had one particular strain that's meant to be mass-produced, resilient, probably devoid of flavor. So there's this great book, maybe you've read it, it's called The Dorito Effect, and it's a book that we've probably talked about the most on this podcast. It's written by this Canadian author, Mark Schatzker, and he talks about the story of the Chicken of Tomorrow contest, the whole contest that they did after World War II to create like the best Frankenbird that could be industrially produced after the war. And the book starts off with this guy who was trying to get his wife to make chicken the same way his either his mom or grandma used to make it. And so she looked up all these recipes. She could never replicate it. And then finally, all she did was she went to a local rancher, got a chicken, and then made it for him this particular way. And he started crying when he ate it, because that was the only difference, was like the chicken that he ate as a kid was sourced from a local farm that his grandmother used versus what his wife had been buying for him at the time. So it's so interesting how we have this concept of food, but what you're serving and the way that you've chosen to live your life is actually like the embodiment of what real food actually is.
Well, I mean, I agree in the sense that I've seen it happen so many times where people will come into our garden and they'll say, oh, I don't like tomatoes, or I don't like this. And I'll be like, just try one. And their eyes will roll back in their head. They've never had a peach like that. They've never had a carrot like that, whatever the thing is that person doesn't like. And, just think about so even within organic now, hydroponic farming is certified as organic. And so just think about the difference between a biodynamic garden where there's none of those inputs that we were even talking about in organic. So there's no organic fertilizer, there's no organic herbicide, organic fungicide, none of that is used. Just biodynamic preparations, which are homeopathic remedies that the farmer makes him or herself by composting essentially various herbs and minerals and things underground in very specific, let's call them almost ritualistic ways, meditative ways. That's the biodynamic farming method, okay? So I didn't mention any store-bought chemicals of any kind. And they compare that to hydroponics where there's not even a sunshine and moonshine. It's indoors. Maybe they have some hydroponic systems outdoors, but that system is generally designed to be like in a warehouse. And so now we're in a warehouse under artificial light bulbs that are LED and of a particular frequency that has nothing to do with the dynamic, ever-changing frequency of the sun. The sun is, never the same on any given second of the day. Every day is slightly different every moment of it. And that now we're in a warehouse, and we don't even have soil. Forget about worms and fungi and all the other things that are going on in the soil. We just have water and this packet of nutrients that, I don't know, some soil scientists has said this is what the plants need. And lo and behold, the plants grow. And you look at it, and there it is. There's spinach. There's a plant. But it's just, you are what you eat, right? And so the difference between that thing, which is more or less like a human hooked up to an IV bag. Like, there's just, the nutrients are going straight in, water soluble, right into the system. There's no intelligence. There's no hunting for the food. There's nothing, right? There's nothing required. It's just going straight in. Versus a plant that's growing in rocky soil, fighting off pests and birds landing on it and the wind blowing and the rain thundering and all these complex different interactions happening. And that thing has got to use its brain to figure out how to survive in the wild. Its brain being its roots. And so its roots are down there just trying to figure out how to turn rocks into food. It's like digesting the ground with the help of bacteria and fungi and relationships and communicating with its surroundings. It's unbelievable, magical, mysterious process of how a living plant does what it's doing underground. And of course, then cattle, if we're talking about meat, are grazing these incredible beings and bringing them into themselves, and humans are then eating the cattle. And so you want to be a part of that system. But to call one thing spinach and another thing spinach, and one's grown inside a warehouse, to call them organic spinach and have one in a warehouse under LED lights with packets of nutrients, and then to have one growing out in a beautiful field surrounded by hundreds of other, types of plants and wildlife and insects and all that kind of stuff. They're horses of different colors. And so that's like when you look at our ingredients on our products, you're going to recognize the names of these things. Chamomile, lavender, Tulsi. These are things that you've heard of. The manner in which they've grown, however, means that you very well may never have encountered anything close to this by hundreds or thousands of percent. Like there's an organization called the Bionutrient Institute, which has done spectrometer studies on different food crops from different farming systems. And what they found is that you would have to eat several hundred pieces of lettuce to get the antioxidants present in one properly grown piece of spinach. I meant to say spinach.
Wow.
You would have to eat several hundred carrots to get the polyphenols present in one properly grown carrot. So we're talking about bushels of carrots, you know what I mean? And so that's the difference between a properly grown raw material and a mass-produced raw material.